The 6 weeks that Donald Trump allotted for the war against Iran have long since passed, and the escalation of the US-Iran war is only gaining momentum. Against the backdrop of completely failed negotiations and Donald Trump's statements that now there are no more deadlines or ultimatums, the Pentagon announced that a third US Navy strike group, led by the aircraft carrier USS George Bush, will arrive in the Middle East within 35 days. At the same time, in recent days, the US Navy has intercepted at least 3 oil tankers sailing under the Iranian flag in Asian waters, which indicates that the conflict is only spreading to new areas. But at the same time, the Pentagon made it clear that the war will last for a long time. They stated that completely clearing the Hormuz Strait of Iranian mines could take at least 6 months. Meanwhile, Iran has already boasted that the country's central bank received its first payment from the USSR. These are the systems for collecting fees for passage through the Hormuz Strait. Meanwhile, unusual events are occurring in the United States. A billionaire from Donald Trump's inner circle was removed from the post of US Secretary of the Navy without explanation, right in the midst of an operation by those very US Navy forces in the Middle East. My name is Alexei Pechi. Let's discuss this topic together. But before we start, I ask you to subscribe to the channel, give it a like, and write any comment you like. And subscribe to my Telegram channel, Pechi News. The link to it is in the description of this video. So, it's already obvious that the US is stuck in a long-term war with Iran, but the question is for how long? Completely clearing the Hormuz Strait of Iranian mines could take at least 6 months. Pentagon officials stated this at a closed briefing for members of the House Armed Services Committee of the U.S. Congress. This means that global oil and gasoline prices could remain at record highs for a long time even after a peace agreement is signed, which is not even on the horizon yet. Republicans, by the way, are already saying that in addition to economic problems, they are concerned about possible political consequences with the upcoming midterm elections in November. Meanwhile, the US continues its blockade of the Strait of Hormuz for Iranian vessels. But today it became clear that the pursuit of Iranian tankers has gone far beyond the region. It is reported that in recent days, US naval forces have intercepted at least 3 oil tankers sailing under the Iranian flag in Asian waters. These are the vessels Deep Sea 7 and Irina. The first 2 were partially loaded with oil and the third was fully loaded. In total, they were carrying about 4 million barrels of Iranian oil. The American military could also have seized the tanker Dereya. According to the vessel tracking service Marine Traffic, Deep Sea was last seen off the coast of Malaysia a week ago. 7 was there a month ago, Irina was off the coast of southern India 3 days ago, and Dereya was off the west coast of India last week. Before that, the Pentagon reported the capture of the Iranian tanker Tiffany in the Indo-Pacific region. Also, on August 19th, US President Donald Trump stated that American forces attacked and took control of the Iranian container ship Tusco in the Gulf of Oman. This is an interesting episode. I talked about it because it turned out that this container ship left a Chinese port where chemicals needed to produce solid fuel for Iranian missiles are loaded. The detention of ships is taking place against the backdrop of a naval blockade of Iran. The US announced it on April 13. The US began a naval blockade of Iran because Tehran blocked shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, through which up to 20% of the world's oil and about 30% of liquefied natural gas passed to the global market. Iran, in turn, blocked the waterway in response to bombings by the US and Israel. But the whole problem for the US is that Iran has already started officially making money from blocking the Strait of Hormuz. The deputy speaker of the Iranian parliament, Hamid Reza Hajibabai, announced today that the Central Bank of Iran has received the first payment from the toll collection system for passage through the Strait of Hormuz. Last month, let me remind you, the Iranian Parliament's Security Committee approved a plan to introduce fees for ships passing through the Strait of Hormuz. At that time, the United States was strongly outraged by this, and US Secretary of State Marco Rubio stated, and I quote, "This is not only illegal, but also unacceptable and dangerous for the whole world, and it is important for the world to have a plan to contain this." But in the end, Tehran previously stated that recognition of Iranian sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz serves as a condition for ending the war. And now the Iranian parliament and the Supreme National Security Council are considering a plan to establish full control over this waterway because it has become clear that there is good money to be made from it. In response, the US is only increasing its military presence in the region and moving towards a total blockade. The 3rd U.S. Navy carrier strike group, led by the aircraft carrier USS George Bush, will arrive in the Middle East within 35 days. Right now, the ships are following routes around the southern tip of Africa, and there is literally not much time left before they arrive. And now the command of the US Navy has announced the deployment of the USS George Bush to the Middle East less than a week after the start of the US and Israeli military operation against Iran, and on March 31 the ship left the Norfolk base in Virginia. And at the moment, I should note, the aircraft carriers Abraham Lincoln and Gerald Ford are already in the region. But the day before, US President Donald Trump stated that he had ordered the extension of the ceasefire with Iran after a request from Pakistan. Tehran has time to prepare a consolidated proposal for the deal. At the same time, he did not specify the exact timing of the new ceasefire. And now Axios sources claim that Trump was ready to give Iran another 35 days to gather their thoughts. But Trump himself called this information fake, assuring that there is no pressure regarding deadlines for a ceasefire or agreeing on a new date for negotiations with Iran. He says, "We're not pressuring you. Take all the time you need to think it over." That's it. Deadlines and ultimatums are over. At the same time, Trump emphasized that the US does not intend to lift the naval blockade of the Republic's ports. A quote from Trump: "The blockade scares them even more than the bombings. They've been bombed for years, but they hate the blockade." But something inside Donald Trump's administration is still happening and indicates that Trump's operation against Iran is not going according to plan, despite the high-profile developments and public statements. Well, first of all, I'll note that Trump initially said 4 to 6 weeks, and he said we're ahead of schedule. It's already the 7th week. The war continues. But there are some interesting indirect signs here that something is not going according to plan. The thing is, today it became known that the US Secretary of the Navy, John Fallon, was for some reason dismissed without any explanation. And it's important to note here that Washington relies on its Navy in carrying out the naval blockade of Iran, which President Trump hopes will undermine the Islamic Republic economically and force it to agree to a peace deal on his terms. And now they go and fire the secretary of those very naval forces that are actually carrying out the blockade right now. And now for the most interesting part. Fallon is a billionaire who had no military experience before his appointment, but is considered close to Donald. And when they remove their own friends from their positions, it's a clear sign of problems within the system. Although overall, in recent months, the head of the Pentagon, Pete Hegseth, has dismissed the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Chief of Naval Operations, and the Deputy Chief of Staff of the Air Force. And on April 2nd, Hegseth also fired the Army Chief of Staff, Randy George, without giving any reason. In general, it's a purge of the Pentagon. It continues just like the US military operation in the Middle East. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments under this episode, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. If you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, you can do so financially with any donation. You can use the links and payment details in the description of this video or the QR code on your screen. I will be grateful for any of your support. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.